So today I'm very excited to have with me, our regional director, Mr. GB Sridhar. Could you set up and say hello? As well as two of our esteemed guests from India. Can I warmly welcome Mr. Ankur Warikoo, a co-founder and CEO of Nearby.com, as well as Mr. Praveen Iyer. Praveen, please. He's a Vice President of Revenue Management for Jet Airways. They will be coming on stage shortly to share about how India has transformed over the last few years, as well as engage in a spirited panel discussion, which I hope you two will join in, but more on that later. What I want to do is start the ball rolling, but by telling you the story of India and its growth. Now, this is a story about a country that's coming into its own right as a global tourism force. You can see, hang on a minute, sorry. I think this computer has... Give me a moment. Never mind, I'll just look at it from here. Okay. Just this one. You just... Okay, thank you. Okay, as you can see, in 2016 alone, India's outbound travel was at 21.9 million and is slated to grow into 34.5 million in 2025. Now, what does that mean? Beyond the numbers, we're looking at growth in terms of spending power, but not just spending power, the scale of that spending power, and also the ability to spend that money. This story of growth extends across India. Tier 3 cities are becoming Tier 2 cities, and Tier 2 cities are fast becoming Tier 1 cities in their own right. Growth also comes in the form of changing worldviews, and through that, it's the evolution of demands and as well as personal preferences. The potential of this market is significant, and the triggers are very, very diverse. And through this session, we hope that you will gain valuable insight into the various factors that make the India market such a fascinating market to go after, and hopefully go home with some insightful thought starters as to how your business can ride on this window of opportunity. Now, this development, of course, has rubbed off very, very positively on Singapore's numbers. You have heard how India is the top source market in terms of cruise for Singapore. What we would also like to share with you is that it is now one of the top 3 in terms of VA, and currently the highest in terms of growth. Well, tourism receipts more or less are stable. We do see a drop in the average length of stay, and this is largely because of the popularity of cruise holidays that Indians have started to take on in a big way. Now, of the 1 over million that we have seen coming into the Indian market, what is interesting is that beyond the family traveler, there is a group known as the early careers coming into India. Loosely defined as, I think, in the age gap of 15 to 24. Yeah, correct, 15 to 24. What you do see is, sorry, 25 to 34, my bad. What you do see is that these people, in terms of their travel, their spending patterns, it is entirely at odds with what we understand as how the traditional Indian traveler is today. These people like to book on their own, travel on their own, make decisions on their own, and basically do not fall into any form of peak travel periods or even traditional marketing efforts. In a nutshell, this, as we know it, has since become this. These are families that we know today. And this has now also spawned into this, bachelorette parties, very, very big right now, and this. Now, I'm just going to pause this slide for a moment so that you can take in what this means. This is what India looks like today. I took all these Instagram posts. These are real-life Instagram posts. No one posed for them for me, okay? I took these off when I was doing research, and what that does show you is that the market is very diverse, right? The preferences are also very different. What a family wants as opposed to what a honeymooner or a group of women or even solo traveler wants is very, very different. But what you can see, and I would like to draw your attention to this, is one underlying factor. Everyone in this picture is aspirational, they are plugged in, they're connected, they know what they want, and travel features extremely strongly in all of them. Now, what does this mean for us? If the India market wants to be going places, we want to be in that picture. And we need to then think about how we talk to these various audiences. In order to do so and do that effectively, we can no longer do what we used to do. In fact, we need to disrupt our own success as a family destination and see how we can then grow Singapore into a lifestyle destination as well, perfect for weddings, maybe not weddings, bachelorette parties, celebrations, anniversaries, shopping, trips on the whim, weekend getaways, so on and so forth. So we've started on this journey in 2017. How have we done that? Well, let me show you how we've done things differently. Of course, the biggest way to make an impression is through Bollywood. And what we have done is partnered with SoCare as well as, SoCare, right? Yeah. Who else is it? Yes, SoCare and Dharma Productions to look at creating Singapore as an aspirational destination within the movie Badrinath Ki Duhalnya. Now, using the idea of Bollywood is not new. But what is different is how we position Singapore. So the story, briefly revolves around a girl from a tier 2 city who runs away to pursue her dream. And where does she run away to? It is Singapore. Singapore within this context of the movie is presented as an aspirational country where you can make your dreams come true. And with the lovable mugs of these A-listers, Alia Bhatt and Varun Dhawan, the movie was shown to great success across pan-India and very much resonated in tier 2 cities. So while we are going after mass appeal, we're also looking at how we're going after mass appeal. And in this case, it's not just tier 1 cities, it's also the tier 2. Beyond the mass appeal and the audiences and families that we very much hold dear to us because they are our bread and butter, what we do look at is also engaging different audiences. I'd like to draw your attention to 4 of these opportunities, starting with NDTV. This was in conjunction with, I think, Mr. Ankur himself, where he came down to Singapore to film 2 episodes of Singapore Insider. Now, this program basically encourages the business traveler to move beyond the boardroom and the hotel room to get in touch with the locals, to see what Singapore has to offer beyond the day-to-day meetings that one gets caught up in. And I think that has been very successful, and I think Ankur will share more of this later on. Secondly, we touched on that very, very contentious topic of food. Now, Singaporeans love our food. Indians, not so much. Why is that so? We are not known particularly to be very veg-friendly, I think. We love our pork, we love our beef, we love, everything else in between. And it becomes very much of a culinary minefield. So what we've done is come up with a veg food guide, which showcases all the vegetarian-friendly options, right from a food court all the way up to Michelin star fine dining as well. Going into the digital space, what we have done is leverage on people's, well, in particular, millennials' obsession with Instagram and brought down 9 social media influencers to pursue their passion in SG, be it shopping, be it food, be it nightlife, and all these beautiful images were splashed out across the interwebs for everybody to see and understand how different visually and graphically Singapore has become. Lastly, we've tied up with Scoopwhoop and Tripoto. These are all digital websites and popular digital platforms to curate listicles, infographics, and those clickbait items, 10 things you can't miss. I came to Singapore and my life changed forever. Well, their life really did change forever. We didn't pay them to write that. But one of these stories helped also to change perception of what could potentially be awaiting for them when they come down to Singapore. In the realm of India Cruise, it was full steam ahead, and we looked specifically at building up the awareness of Singapore as a popular cruise hub, as well as cruising as a popular holiday option. All this while shoring up the capabilities of the frontliners and travel agents who are very keen on selling this product. To this end, we had, as you can see in February and June, bookazines, fam trips to showcase how an awesome cruise packaged holiday with a strong pre and post itinerary can make amazing memories when one is in Singapore. Well, on the industry and frontliner perspective, we looked at working with CLIA to do frontliner trainings, as well as increasing the mind space of cruise with a thought leadership forum in March. Of course, all these marketing efforts need to be backed up with conversions, and we went out strongly with multiple partnerships across board, be it in online with the likes of Make My Trip, or on the offline with Thomas Cook, Mercury Travels, so on and so forth. What I would like to draw your attention to is, for the first time, what we did do differently was the fact that we also inked a strategic partner with the e-payment gateway, Paytm. It just started last year, so I'm expecting very, very exciting things to come. This, of course, is layered with the consistent engagements with the travel trade that we do throughout the year, and also with all your participation to ensure that Singapore remains a strong presence in the minds of these travel agents. And starting with January, where we do Tier 1 roadshows through Delhi and Satay, as well as Bangalore, Bombay, and Chennai. And in Tier 2, the Tier 2 cities which were focused in July. In the MICE space, obviously, it's about numbers. And it's also about the quality of those numbers. Now, one of the things that we were looking at beyond chasing those numbers, though, was about bringing up and teasing out what could possibly resonate with these Indian audiences, but were also uniquely local and shouted out the Singapore story in a very special way. Some highlights include the securing of Amway Group, which most of the itinerary is in Sentosa and RWS properties. We also looked at the launch of Inspire 3, which had focused on special, unique local experiences like dragon boating. And we invited trade intermediaries, MICE media, as well as corporates to come down to Singapore to experience this all for themselves. Lionel did speak a bit about the brand launch, so I won't go into too much detail, but suffice to say, this was a truly groundbreaking effort because, as you know, running a public activity, public consumer activity in a country the scale of India poses many, many challenges. What we did do was to work with nonprofit organization Street Art India Foundation and to convert the working dock into an open-air museum for a whole month. We took a weekend, which became the Singapore Weekender, and for that particular weekend, the entire Mumbai got to be exposed to the sheer variety of talent that Singapore had to offer, be it through music, be it through food, even workshops, dance, and film. So we've done all those things differently in 2017. How then is 2018 going to be looking like? Well, I'm very happy to say that we're going to be doing a lot more of that because the work has only just begun. This shift is a strategic one, and the gameplay is obviously a much long-term one as well. We will be doing many of these engagements and tactical partnerships, but of course, with a focus to how can we better effectively market, better effectively engage towards them. Creative on-ground and off-ground consumer activations will also be focused on because organic reach is what we found reaches out very, very effectively to the crowd in India. Shoving messages down their throat is not going to work because the Indian consumer today is incredibly savvy. Lastly, cruise and MICE. These are all key areas that we will be growing demand for. And I will leave you with, I think most of our partners here will want to know what then is going to be happening for the trade show piece. 2018 and 2019 will look at adding new cities, more cities, and also we're trying to cover more ground, so it's going to be a dual concurrent track. So you will be getting more of this information soon. Akan datang, do wait to hear about this more. With that, I leave you with the year in review video before I pass it on to Mr. Sridhar. Okay.
All right. Namaste, namaskar, vanakkam, vandanam, ni hao, selamat. Oh, no more selamat pagi also. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sridhar, Regional Director for South Asia, Middle East and Africa. What you have just seen is not Singapore Tourism Board's work. It's all of our work in that 5-minute clip. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank and applaud each and everyone in this room for contributing to what has been an extraordinary year for India in 2017. So big round of applause for ourselves. Because many of you in the room somehow were involved in how we had managed our events and promotions in India. And as I've said, 2017 was a good year. Let's make it better. So when I was telling my team that, hey, we have to make it better, they were going, how boss, kongsi me. But I think we have, as we talked about today in the morning, tourism in transformation, India is in transformation. And I think all of us in the room have to acknowledge that India is going through many different types of development. And we would like to, therefore, today, the theme-wise selected connecting with the rising young and middle class, is for us to sort of take stock of what India's transformation is going to look like. All right, so the theme for 2018 is with passion, forging new possibilities. So let me just give you a quick view on how I'm looking at the year ahead. So I've selected the theme with passion, forging new possibilities for a reason, right? So we would like to work with all of you to rethink and reimagine India and how you are approaching India. And this is exactly my same message in the market as well, whether it is our partners, how we are selecting our partnerships, how are we looking at our activations, whether it's a Paytm partnership. We were the first national tourism organization to partner Paytm, which is a internet-based payment gateway. And we would like to look at those kind of partnerships and do things differently. So 3 thrusts for 2018, deepen and expand our partnerships. Deepening is about how do I work with each and everyone in this room? How do I work with each and everyone in my India partnership window, right? Whether it's Thomas Cook, SOTC, and Flight Shop, or Travel Tours. How do I deepen the partnerships? But beyond that, I would like to expand partnerships. Partnerships must go beyond because India is so huge. People do not realize India is actually Europe, right? It's many countries called India. Each state is a country, right? We were just having a conversation before, and somebody made this statement, actually, India is a few Singapores and more. I said, actually, no, India is about few Singapores and many, many more, right? So in terms of reaching out to those audiences, we need to expand partnerships. So I am looking at beyond the travel trade. How do I work with payment gateways? How do I work with banks? How do I work with a media company? How do I work with, I don't know, with this crazy idea, how do I work with Samsung TV and make every retail shop selling Samsung TV do our Passion Made Possible video, for example, right? So let's get creative. I mean, you guys may have some connections, you guys may have some suggestions, please let us know. And I would also like to deepen and expand partnerships here in Singapore, working with the various DMCs, the attractions, and you know that we do it coming from a very genuine space, whether it's working with the DMCs or attractions or hotels. We would like to see how we can expand. Promote our new brand creatively and effectively. We need to rise above the clutter. There's a lot of noise in the market. There's a lot of clamor for the Indian tourists. We need to stand out. We need to continue plugging at bringing in the Indian tourists. It is not going to be an easy task because the Indian consumer today is patronized or is solicited by many, many different destinations. So how do we promote our brand creatively and effectively? Continue showcasing Singapore's diverse offerings. Guys, my topic today may be connecting with the rising young adults and middle class, but please don't walk away from the room thinking I'm going to not focus on families. That's the furthest from the truth. My base, your bread and butter, my bread and butter is a family travel. We jolly well better get our act together and make sure that we keep Indian travelers, Indian families seeing Singapore as a top-of-mind family destination, which is what we are today in the market. Anytime, any surveys, any awards comes up, Singapore as a family-friendly destination will win hands down. And we need to maintain that position, right? And we need to see in each and every way, how are we enhancing the product experience, whether you're an attraction, whether you're a hotel, whether you're a DMC, please stay focused with the families with children under 12. Early careers is what we are going to be talking about today, the early careers and the established careers. We need to go after that market. The reason why we are doing this topic today is because we do not want to lose sight. India is such a young country. If we don't appeal to them, you and I are going to have a problem filling the hotel rooms and attractions in the future. Because if we become a stale, expensive, not so interesting destination for the young adults, then how are we going to bring them into the country, and how are they eventually going to be families, and so on and so forth? How do we sustain the growth? So early careers is a very important agenda for us, and that's why we're discussing that, and we'll be doing that today. Cruise travelers, meetings and incentive groups, traveler from Tier 2 and 3 cities. So in a nutshell, those are my 3 thrusts for 2018. We look forward to working with you on that. Let me go into setting up for the panel discussion, right? So I would like to just focus on 2 trends, the emerging demographic patterns as well as the digital transformation. India's demographic, India is on the move. I think all of us know that. Let's look at some numbers. By 2030, the number of cities with populations of more than 1 million will grow from 42 now to 68, right? And it is a big growth story. Behind the growth headlines is an even more important story. Consumer behaviors and spending patterns are shifting as incomes rise and Indian society itself evolves. India's rate of urbanization has been very different from most other countries. It is not concentrated in a few cities like in Indonesia or Thailand, maybe not as fast as China, and it is not as dispersed as in the US. But Indian cities could generate 70% of net new jobs, 70% of India's GDP, and drive a 4-fold increase in per capita incomes. What does that mean for travel and tourism? Think about that. So, increasing urbanization. Growing affluence. India's demographic pattern is also going to make India a very, very affluent society. Two things that we need to look at. 1, consumption of travel products and services are expected to grow. And 2, increase in the propensity to spend on travel, right? The Boston Consulting Group reports that India's nominal year-over-year expenditure growth of 12% is more than double the anticipated global rate of 5%, and will make India the 3rd largest consumer market by 2025. So rising affluence is going to be the biggest driver of increasing consumption. Rise of the early careers, right? Now, they, in the age bracket of 18 to 34, they are going to dictate many, many different consumer patterns happening in India. Yesterday we were having dinner with Praveen Ankur at Whole Earth, good vegetarian Peranakan food. And one of the conversations was about mobile phones, right? And Ankur was making a statement. The Indian consumer, right, the affluent Indian consumer today changes a mobile phone every 9 months. Now, that was an interesting number for me. I don't know how often you guys change phones. I change phones maybe about 2-3 years, right? But every 9 months, a mobile phone, an affluent Indian is able to change. So what does that mean, right? So 3 consumption patterns. 1, shift from ownership to access. Car sharing, property rental will be the norm. Ownership will be an anomaly. Car aggregators like Uber and Ola. Ola is very popular in India, offering the same convenience. Co-working space, save for travel and leisure instead. They will save for leisure and travel instead. The second is going to be digitization. They are natives to technology. The environment in which they converse and interact is going to be very native technology environment. They are habituated to instant gratification and dependent on mobile apps to eat, right? And book tickets and conduct banking activities. And that's why the chief executive of Nearby.com is here today. How do you go into this space, right? Use this instant gratification angle to connect to them and make them spend. And the third, growing conscientiousness in well-being and social good. They are going to be looking at social, environmental friendly options and consume in that manner. In terms of opportunities for us, right? So increasing urbanization, growing affluence, rise of the early careers. What are the opportunities for Singapore Tourism Board and Singapore stakeholders in the room? Increasing urbanization means we have better access to tier 2 cities and allows for market penetration. And that is why you will see in July, I'm getting the team out to about 10 cities, right? Coimbatore, Trichy, Surat, Kolkata, all of these cities are on the move. So we need to get there, stay engaged in those cities. Growing affluence will increase consumption. What this means for us, we need to increase tourism receipts and per capita expenditure through marketing of premium experiences to the consumers. So in your respective organizations, the kind of experiences you're pushing out to the Indian travelers, what are they? How are you enhancing them? And it's a chicken and egg question. When I talk to the Indian traveler, they tell us, oh, you know what, the DMCs and the attractions are not giving this new information that you are giving us. And when we want this, oh, they are not even able to sell it. And then when I come here, you guys are saying, oh, but then we give this product, the Indian traveler, Indian agent doesn't want to push it. We need to get this balance right, guys. I think we need to really ask ourselves what exactly are we doing differently and how are we contributing to changing perceptions and changing consumer habits. And that is why in July I started with the earlier roadshow. I'm asking each and every one of you who are coming on the roadshow to tell us what are you doing differently, what is working for you, so that we can use then this feedback and talk to the travel trade in the country, in the cities. Rise of the Indian millennials, what this means, increased engagement with the target segment through digital touchpoints and their desire for overseas travel. The second second trend is India's digital wave, right? So here we are talking about the target we need to target incentive movements from new industry verticals and showcase new and immersive experiences and activities that have a distinctive local element, right? They are going, the Digital India, there's an entire program now. The country is likely to reach 500 million internet users, right, by middle of this year, with approximately 850 million users by 2025. Now that's a huge jump, right? And India's trajectory is such that they may jump cycles, you know. So they're talking about, in India, they're talking about maybe instead of touch phone and touch related for your mobile phone, food orders and stuff like that, they may go straight into robotics. They speak into the phone in many, and vernacular languages in India is diverse. But they are talking about, they are going to now be able to jump without touch, go straight, and the fellow is just going to speak into the phone, and some robot is going to decipher what he's saying, whether it's in Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, whatever, and they are going to give that consumer that experience. So how are we plugging in? How are we doing this, right? And as I said, please maintain that image. India is many countries sitting into one country named India, right? So digital wave, how do we ride it? Profile of the tech-friendly Indian traveler, right? The travel and hospitality sector is rapidly evolving. They are looking for improved customer experiences. We need to see how we can bring and build strong brand loyalties. They are loyal, so if you have good experience and you can give it to them, they will keep on coming back. Jurong Bird Park is still an all-time favorite. Why? Because they are very loyal to Jurong Bird Park. The zoo, the night safari, very popular. Sentosa, very popular, and so on and so forth, right? Why? Because you guys are able to give, all of us are able to give them experiences, and that brand loyalty sticks, right? So how do we do that? And with this tech-friendly Indian traveler who is searching online, they are very mobile-friendly, they are seeking discounts, right? They are looking at value-for-money options. They want free Wi-Fi. So all of this, because they are sharing on the go. They tell stories on the go. They take pictures and brag, I'm here having this experience, and they want to do that. So how do we enable that in our properties, right? Millennials to drive the boom in India's online consumption. You will see that 36% of India's population will be millennials in the year by 2020. They will form 61% of India's internet base, 78% of online shopper base. Now that's huge, right? So technology will have a transformational impact on travel and tourism in India, and India could become the fastest growing internal market. In terms of growth, they may be the fastest growing internet market globally. So what does it mean for us? India's digital transformation, the high internet penetration in India has encouraged, right, the digital transformation of travel. What it means to us is we should be partnering more online travel agents to offer tourism products. We will also look at ensuring information is readily available online, like the Tourism Info Hub, right? So we have Thomas Cook, one of our main strategic partners, already on board with the Tourism Information Hub, and we are seeing how we can bring that to the next level. And targeted partnership with e-commerce industry players, e-wallets, like Paytm, transport apps, online retail, we are looking into that, and we would like to engage with the Indian visitors on social media. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would like, sorry, did I just show this slide, or you all saw this slide already? Okay. So, connecting with India's rising young and growing middle class is going to be very, very important. And the underlying question for all of us is, how do we grow the love? And I use this word very deliberately. I think being in the market, I realize Indian travelers or Indian consumers truly love Singapore. They are inspired by Singapore. They like the idea of being in Singapore. They like the idea of showing off that they have been to Singapore, and it is one of their holiday options at the moment. And we need to keep that. So together, we need to figure out how we can grow the love of Indian visitors for Singapore. All right. Thank you very much. I'm done with my presentation part. So I would now like to invite to the dais the Chief Executive and Co-founder of Nearby.com. Now, Nearby.com is India's #1 discovery and transaction platform for stepping out. It works with over 40,000 local businesses comprising food and drinks, beauty and wellness, activities, movies and events across 33 cities in India. And prior to Nearby.com, our panel member was head of Groupon's India and Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippine business. And Nearby.com is a result of a management buyout of Groupon's India business in August 2015. He's an internet entrepreneur since 2008, and he co-founded Ascentium Web along with 2 other batchmates from his school, ISB, right? So he's a regular public speaker and social media influencer with 500,000 plus followers across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And he's part of Fortune magazine's 40 under 40 list for India, has been named as India's top executives under 40 by Business Today, and has been awarded the Social Media Entrepreneur of the Year by Silicon Review. So a very impressive resume, and one of the most important part of the resume is he was also part of our NDTV TV series, 2 episodes, Singapore Insider, so he's got some insight information about how to enjoy Singapore. So let me welcome to the dais co-founder, CEO, Nearby.com, Ankur Warikoo.
Thank you, Sridhar, for the generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be back in Singapore. I always love coming to the country, and I could not agree more. There is this somehow natural love for Singapore in the Indian travel consumer. And whenever we're thinking of possibly a first international vacation or a family vacation, and now hopefully frequent vacations, whether it's bachelorette parties or just hanging out for a long weekend, Singapore almost always is the first in mind. I've been an internet entrepreneur, as I mentioned, for about 9 years, and I've been very fortunate to have experienced the entire transformation of the Indian internet industry in this last decade. What I will leave you with is hopefully a shared appreciation for what is fundamentally the biggest shift that is happening in India, and I would recognize the world over, which is the rise of what I call the young Indian or the young career Indian. This is at a scale that has never been witnessed before. The closest that was China almost 10 to 15 years back. And conclusively, there is no data point that is expected in the near future to be able to replicate this kind of scale. So when someone thinks of India as a country, there are several numbers that are thrown around. The most obvious ones are 1.3 billion people, then the GDP growth rate, the number of mobile users, and so on. But as someone who's witnessing this change firsthand, if there is one number that I think best personifies the impact and scale of what India is going through, it is this number. It's very hard to guess what this number is. Any guesses what this number stands for? Anyone in the room? Sorry? The median age. 29 is actually, congratulations, there should be an award, a free trip to India, sponsored by STV, all perks paid for. This is the average age of an Indian as expected in 2020, which will make us the youngest country in the world at scale. And this is a very fundamental point to make. Just to awe you with some numbers, there are 393 million people who were born in India after the year 2000. This is more than the collective population of several countries combined. And if you were to extend this slightly beyond, there are 443, in addition to the 393 odd people that were born in the 80s and the 90s. So suddenly you're looking at a country that is beginning to earn and beginning to appreciate how to spend their money. So this is not a country where they've already made their money and are driving the BMWs and the Audis of the world and now are thinking of where to vacation. These are people who are just getting started in their life and are looking at the fine life and how to trade time and money. And this number, in my opinion, is driving three very fundamental trends which I would love to share with you and hopefully get you to appreciate the same way that I do. Number one is technology adoption, and Sridhar mentioned this. India is what I would call a mobile-first country. It is now consuming and witnessing and sharing the global platform driven by the mobile phone. It's no longer a laptop. It's no longer offline media as much. There are 1.2 billion mobile connections in the country, and for 1.3 billion people, that's almost a phone a person. And that's just the start. There are close to about 400 million smartphone users in the country. These are people who are using not just the Apple iPhones. In fact, I hope you guys know that the biggest market for Google outside of the US is India because the Android platform is massive. Of course, China is there, but it has its fair share of iOS. India is fundamentally an Android market with 83% market share. And it's also surprisingly a prepaid market where people are not postpaid. They are not consuming content and then getting billed at a monthly basis, but they're prepaying for their telephone services in advance, which explains the reason why businesses such as Paytm, which is a large payment gateway and recharge platform, are becoming so big. So imagine a country where most of the people are on an Android device and most of them are prepaying for the services, whether it's data or it's voice, and that fundamentally changes the way that they look at money, and I'm going to speak about that as well. 56 million smartphones were shipped in just the last quarter of 2017. And that's the scale at which we are looking at. And these are just smartphone devices shipped So we're looking at almost adding 60 million roundabout smartphone devices every 3 months in the country right now. Part of it is because people are replacing their phones. So as I mentioned, the average tenure of a phone in the urban Indian's life is 9 months. And that's because phones are really cheap. You're getting really good quality phones as almost as less as $100 or between 100 to $200. And that makes it for very, very speedy changes of the phone. There are 300 million urban internet users. These are people who reside in cities and are using the phone. And within the urban India, the internet penetration is already at 65%, which means for you guys, reaching out to the traveler that potentially could come to Singapore is almost conclusively through online. This is where their research is starting. This is where the decisions are being taken. This is where all the content is being consumed. And it's only natural that while they may be influenced by offline media, their eventual purchasing and decision-making is happening online. The second piece is on spending patterns, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. Because it's 1.3 billion people and because it's the world's largest or one of the world's largest countries in terms of GDP, it's assumed that there is a fair bit of money in the country. And possibly because you guys work closely with the Indian ecosystem, you'll recognize that India is still a fairly poor country. There is pockets of richness, and those are very strongly concentrated. And I explain that in a very favorite matrix that I have, which is if you were to plot the two important things that a consumer cares about, which is time and money, and just say, hey, do I have time, do I not have time, do I have money, and do I not have money? India almost a decade back would be right there. We have a lot of time on our hands, but we don't have a lot of money. And that explains the bargaining, that explains all the haggling that we do at shops and malls, because we find it within our purpose to save money, and we don't mind spending time on doing that. So we'll move shop to shop to shop to shop, or travel agent to travel agent to travel agent, to find the cheapest flight, to find the cheapest hotel, to find the best destination, not because it's cheap, but because there is a right attitude towards money. And it's largely driven by how the country is still very young. It still had only a few decades of independence and growth and so on. When you compare that with something like a US, you would see that they are possibly right up there, which is they have a lot of money but not so much time on their hands. And that explains a lot of choices that the American consumer makes, because they then start to pay money to save time. They will pay for same-day shipment at Amazon to get it faster. They will pay for search pricing on Uber to get the cab right away. They will pay for a lot more convenience and high quality of service because that's what they care for. Not so much, say, the Indian consumer 10 years back. Arguably, that is changing. So we're getting closer and closer to having a balance of time and money, and thus the appreciation for destinations such as Singapore as against several other destinations that are still available but are cheaper and are not necessarily considered. And my commitment as an Indian, as a fellow participant in the ecosystem, is that we are making every effort possible that we come right in the center of where this is by another 10 years or so, so that we can have a very generous mix of people who love to save money, and for no fault of theirs, they will be treated in a very different segment. And people who love to spend money, and for no love for them, they will be treated different. And there will be a fine balance of people who will be coming through. This is where I would argue China is roundabout now. And you would find that there are enough Chinese travelers that are still very, very focused on having a great value for money vacation, and there are enough Chinese travelers that are also focused on just having a luxury vacation, and they wouldn't mind considering a Singapore as a destination. Now, the spending pattern then drives a lot of this data. So there are about 200 million people in India that are above 10,000 US dollars of income. That may seem like a really small amount, but for India, this is a really big amount, considering that the GDP per capita is less than 2,000 US dollars. So you're looking at this Indian who is almost 5 times as high as the average GDP. And there's 70 million people who hold a passport. That doesn't mean that they travel outside, because having a passport is a really cool, fancy thing in India. So people just apply for a passport and hold on to it. But it's expected that at some point of time, these 70 million will start stepping out. So as Yumin mentioned in her data, that close to about 35 million people are expected to step out of the country by 2025. That will be from this pool. 11% of urban income is spent on what's called having fun. And this is not just traveling. This is eating out. This is leisurely entertainment. This is watching movies, which is a big pastime, in fact, the national sport of the country. Watching cricket, which is the national sport of the country, and so on. And this is a fairly high percentage, considering the fact that income levels are still fairly low. So imagine someone who's earning about $10,000 a year on an average. They are willing to spend as high as $1,000 on just having fun. And then when you center it down to people who are earning $50,000, $100,000 a year, then you suddenly get the vicinity of the traveler coming through. And in Jan of 2018, which is as early as 2 to 3 months back, there were 1.1 billion transactions conducted digitally, whether through platforms like Paytm and so on. So this is a segment that is changing the way it's looking at spending. It's not so much the saving economy that it used to be, or our parents were used to, or at least taught us to be. It's willing to spend money on the right things. It's willing to do so digitally without necessarily having the, at least the, let's say, the trust issues of what internet payments are all about and so on. And it is beginning to trade their time with money. And the third thing, which this fascinatingly young population poses, and I hope I leave you with this message stronger than ever before, is the opportunity that it poses. With some striking coincidence, India is roundabout where China was about 10 years back. I think we're giving ourselves a little more credit than we deserve. In my opinion, we are about 15, 20 years behind China maybe. But if you look at the numbers, then it is shockingly similar. GDP per capita for China 2004 and for India 2014 are within dollars of each other. And look at where China is today. You look at organized retail and the penetration of that in the country. China in 2004 was about 10%, India is about 9%, and look at where China is today. You look at the number of online shoppers in the country in about 2000, look at where China was. India was 2014 at about 38 million, and look at where China is today. And when you look at the spend per buyer online, you look at China in 2004, you look at India at 14, and then you look at China today. So we have our work cut out as a country, and that clearly is to grow consistently and deliver on the GDP per growth that we've committed, which, if it's in the ballpark of 7 to 8%, there is no reason why all the numbers that you witness from China and all the awesomeness that China has to provide, not just to Singapore, but the world over, can easily be replicated, if not circumvented, by the Indian story. I'll leave you with this as a representative of the young India story, and happy to take on questions when Sridhar poses us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Spoken like a true blue internet entrepreneur. Clear one set of numbers, and I can see eyes in the room. Pung, 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 so many eyes all just popping out. India is on the move, and as Ankur has said, perhaps India is at a position now where China was 10 years ago, and that means that there's a lot of potential for us to look at. Right? So 70 million passports. They have the passports, they brag about it, they may not travel. 300 million, estimated 300 million in the middle class bracket. India's arrivals into Singapore was 1.27 million. So you work out the mathematics, the amount of potential that we actually have to tap. Over the last, we are now at April middle, over the last Jan, Feb, March, so 2017 was a 16% growth over the previous year, making it the highest growth market, right? But in Jan, in Feb, in March, year on year, we are still doing double-digit growth. So think about that, right? And how do we tap into that? and make it happen for the rest of the year so that come TIC next year, I have a better video to show you and all of us can be happy, right? Now, the next speaker I would like to just bring to the dais is, he is with Jet Airways India Limited. He has been there for 13 years, right? And Jet Airways is the largest airline of India with revenues about 3.5 billion US dollars. I will let him talk about it a bit more. Now, he's a member of the leadership team at Jet Airways, and he has recently moved to head the global revenue and inventory management portfolio to work directly with the CEO and the Senior Vice President of Network and Revenue Management. Until recently, he was also leading India's domestic and international passenger business and reported into the Chief Commercial Officer, right? And he has worked in the commercial department, he has worked in the sales and marketing department. He has provided leadership to globally diverse teams, implementation of new routes and network strategy, country-specific revenue and inventory management strategy, and he has been part of the team to grow revenue and market share in India, domestic and India international markets, turned around loss-making routes, and reduced cost of sales. And he has also been part of the team which completed organizational restructuring to deliver superior results. So I would like to invite with pleasure Mr. Praveen Iyer to dais, the Chief Revenue Officer for Jet Airways. Come.
That's fine. Good afternoon, everybody. I know I'm standing right between you and your lunch. And I promise you I won't take long because Yomin, Ankur, and Sridhar have made it very easy for me. They have covered it all. So I got nothing left to talk about, but nonetheless, it's been 12 years since I've come to this country, and there is sure a transformation that I can see. And I want to come here more often than I have in the past, for sure. And what I like about the morning session that I attended was that the punchline goes with the Indians. The word passion. Because we are passionate as Indians, and the punchline goes in line with the Indian mentality more than anything else. So thank you for having me over. I just want to quickly give you a background of Jet Airways. A couple of cab rides yesterday, they kept asking me, am I from Jetstar? I kept saying, no, I'm from Jet Airways. And they kept telling me, no, we have not heard about Jet Airways. Are you sure it's Jetstar? I said, no, it's Jet Airways. So I confirmed that again, it's Jet Airways and not Jetstar. All right. So just to quickly talk you guys through, welcome aboard. I want to start off through a video which talks about us as an airline. So I will reinforce the fact there is Jet Airways again. And that's the video to start with. Thank you. So we are one of the millennial carriers. In fact, on the 5th of May, we celebrate 25 years. So it's 24 years up in the sky. And I will just quickly talk you guys through most of what was covered earlier in the session, and then talk about the airline industry in itself in India. So you heard about this from all the members here. What makes us unique is that we are growing at more than twice the growth that you witness anywhere else in the world. So where India is growing at 12%, the rest of the world is growing at about 5%. You've heard about the GDP statistics with the fastest growing country, but the consumables are growing at the fastest pace across various countries in the entire globe. Again, disposable income is rising. the consumables in India has reached $1.7 trillion in 2017. That's the max ever, and it continues to grow. It's likely to grow tenfold over the next 5 to 7 years. And that's the kind of potential, that's the kind of growth that we will continue to witness, given that the middle class is growing at a much faster pace, which you will see in the subsequent slide. So this slide gives you a peek into how the middle class is going to grow over the next 10 years. And what is clearly visible here is this phase between 2018 right to 2025, India is going to grow at a much faster pace. And more importantly, the wealthy urbanites by 2025 will constitute 33% or 1/3 of the overall population, and 1/3 of a base of 1.6 billion by then in 2025. 1.7 billion is almost 500 million wealthy, rich individuals. That's almost twice the population of the US of A. And you can imagine the potential that exists. But with this comes certain obvious questions. And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about India and the growing infrastructure constraint that we have in India. Is the growth for real? Are you going to see 2,000 plus aircrafts being operated by India in 2025, etc., etc.? Now, a peek into this data, which is published on a monthly basis by DGCA, clearly suggests that yes, the potential exists. And it exists because we are adding every month close to 5 airplanes in India. And it's flying. It's not flying idle. We have Bombay saturated. We have Delhi saturated. We have Bangalore. 3 critical cities in India saturated from a capacity standpoint. But the growth is in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. The tier 2, tier 3 city growth is not just from a brick and mortar perspective. We heard Ankur talk about the digital explosion. It's growing at a faster pace from the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Clearly, the transformation, in my view, took place starting November of 2015, when I think India went through the demonetization, and it transformed the way you transacted as an individual. And that has really helped a lot of these digital-based companies like Paytm, for example, that's really grown at a 2x and 3x pace month over month, not year over year. So that clearly goes to show the potential that exists. The aviation industry itself is going through a very strong phase with growth both in domestic and international. And I'm pretty confident that the 35 million number will be achieved by 2022 and not 2025. Because this growth with the new aircrafts coming into India, which is what I would like to highlight here, from an infrastructure standpoint, railways, being the monopoly, is the #1 transporter in India. The longer destinations, when I say longer destinations, I mean 1,000 kilometers or more, airline is going to take over the rail network in a matter of 5 to 6 years. And that's the transformation that we are going through as a country. Investments, like I said, 2,000 odd aircrafts over the next 15 years. Jet placed orders of 150 aircrafts. We have 5 aircrafts coming in every year, every month as an industry. The capacity year over year is growing at almost 20%. The passenger volumes are growing at 20%. The industry overall is running at an occupancy of 90% domestic consistently for the last 1 year. So you can just imagine that it's waiting to explode. And like a sponge, it's just sucking in all the capacity that's coming in, because the Indian consumer wants to experience and wants to fly regardless of where he is from, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, it doesn't matter. The most recent step towards ensuring that this growth continues is this initiative by the government of India. This is called the Udan. Udan means to fly. And if I break this down, what it means is Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, which means it's the vision of the government to make sure that every citizen of the country flies, takes to the skies. And they have put up several schemes which has ensured that even a small town with a population of 5 lakhs, 500,000 or 1 million has got strips. And these are subsidized by the government. As a result, it's not just reaching out to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. We are now going into tier 4, tier 5, tier 6 cities, opening up airports there. Close to 100 plus airports have been authorized, and all the turboprops. So India has ordered close to 100 turboprops, which will come up in the next 5 years. And it will fly into these smaller towns across India, which will then create a nice hub and spoke between the smaller towns, the tier 2 cities, the tier 3 cities, and even the metros. So clearly there is a plan. India's story is not just about the metros. It's not just about Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai. It's beyond that. And that's the trend that we see changing. That's the experience that we see. We talk about India being passionate about this sport called cricket. It's no longer about the Sunil Gavaskars or the Vengsarkars who are ruling the roost. The young brigade that you see playing for this country or competing in sports, we just managed to win 28 plus gold medals in the Commonwealth Games. They're all coming from small towns. And that's because we are creating that infrastructure to create heroes within the country and creating a network within the country. And that's exactly what this scheme is all about. Again, we will continue to see tremendous growth across India. You will continue to see India producing enough traffic amongst itself and outgrowing a lot of countries, and the outbound traffic to the international centers will also go up. What Sridhar touched upon earlier was about early careers, and that's all about millennials who no longer believe in business or leisure. They call it pleasure. So they essentially want to travel on a Thursday and a Friday for business meetings. They want to make sure that they spend the weekend and have fun in wherever they are, and make sure that they mix business with pleasure. Their spouses travel with them, their girlfriends travel with them. Live-in was, as a culture, was a sin in India. Not anymore. There are a lot of families, a lot of couples living in together, and it's no longer a sin across. So the whole culture is going through a transformation. The whole mindset is going through a change. And we ourselves living in the metros sometimes get a bit of a culture shock when we have tier 2, tier 3 individuals talking a particular language. So that's the cultural change that we are going through. That's the transformation from the way digitization has helped, the way technology has helped. And I think when we grew up as kids, we had absolutely no access to anything in terms of information. Today's kids are so advanced in terms of what they know that as a parent, you're scared to have a conversation with a kid because the kid knows sometimes more than what you do. So I think that transformation and how we channelize this into the right outcome, I think that's in our hands more than anything else. These are the preferred destinations. Our number one destination, of course, happens to be UAE. Out of the India, US is the other preferred destination. Singapore, by the way, is number 4th in the pecking order when it comes to passengers shuttling from India to this part of the world. And we expect that to grow at a very steady pace. I did hear about the 16% growth that we witness, and please don't get me wrong when I say this. We are used to the 20 and 30% growth, and that's a new benchmark. That's a new norm for the India. that we're talking about. So just to give you some statistics, Thailand, the India to Thailand market last year, 2017, grew at 33%. The India to Dubai market or the UAE market grew at almost 35%. The India to Europe, India to US, which are considered to be longer hauls, as a result, the growth is very less usually, has grown at 20+%. And India to Australia has grown at 22, 23%. So, and India domestic itself has grown at 25%. So that's the kind of growth trajectory that we are talking about. That's the kind of growth that we witness consistently across various destinations. And we see those consistently across various destinations is because there are several segments that have been attacked. It's not just the millennial. We talked about the middle class earlier. The middle class is growing at a very fast pace. Families, kids are becoming influencers within family in terms of destinations that you want to fly to. And that's where I think Singapore needs to buck up in terms of availability of room nights. I remember the conversation earlier this morning about Airbnb. I think it's a very critical piece in the scheme of things. I know Airbnb, at least for one of the leading OTAs in India, contribute to, for all international traffic, contribute to almost 25% of the room nights that they sell. And that's the rate at which it's growing. It's growing because it's very reasonable. It takes care of certain key requirements of families that travel especially. It's cost effective. It's hygienic. It's located in residential places, which means it's safe. It covers your safety aspect. And more importantly, it feels like a home away from home, the Airbnb experience. So I think it's about time, Sridhar, the STB looks at it, because I think it's a critical piece for you to grow tourism within this part of the world if you want the Indian crowd to come here more often than not. Last but not the least, I would also like to talk about our presence into Singapore. We have 6 daily, we have 2 Delhi, 2 Bangalore, and 2 Bombay flights into Singapore, morning, evening. It's convenient timings. You can go to Bombay, land there in the afternoon if you take a day flight, and come back late in the night. So it pretty much gives you the right schedule from an India perspective. And I think between India and Singapore, we have the maximum capacity deployed between all carriers put together between India and any other country. So this, for me, goes to show that it's an important destination. It's a critical piece from an India growth story perspective. But what is critical, and I think we will talk through this during the panel discussion, is where does Singapore want to place itself from an Indian consumer mind perspective? Millennial, the family, but there are certain constraints which we talk about as we carry on this afternoon and keep you guys hanging between you and the lunch. But before I conclude my presentation, I would like to give you guys a glimpse of India, and that India, the way we fly.
1 minute, I had my feet on the ground, but then I'm soaring, freedom bound, and as I rise in the open sky.
All right, guys, I know, as Praveen kept on saying, we are standing between you and lunch, but first of all, thanks, Ankur and Praveen, for the very analytical discussion in terms of how India is transforming, as well as the insights that they have shared. So big round of applause for both Ankur and Praveen, please. Let us take about 15 minutes. I know you guys are very hungry, but let us take about 15 minutes to have some Q&A. And I think maybe I should declare, Praveen, I don't think you're joining Airbnb anytime soon, right? Because the way you were talking, I was thinking, okay, he's doing a plugin for Airbnb. Well, the consultation paper is out, so let's see how that transforms Singapore's accommodation options as well. Okay, I think on the screen you have the Mentimeter. This is one way of making it fuss-free and easy for you to give us some questions. So while you all are thinking of your first question and popping it into the screen, I'll look at it as it comes in. Maybe I will start out with a couple of questions for both Ankur and Praveen. Maybe let us start out with Ankur first. Ankur, from your work with nearby.com and how you have seen consumerism going up, right? So where does the Indian e-commerce landscape stand now, and what do you see in that space, and how is that relevant to the travel sector?
So the Indian e-commerce is, travel is the most organized and mature segment in the e-commerce space. It's been around forever. Make My Trip was the first one, and it's truly established. So virtually all airline tickets and a lot of the hotel bookings now are moving online. What I've been very fortunate to witness is that even local purchases, even retail, even offline spends are now moving online. What is conclusive is that the Indian consumer starts with researching online. They may not be making the final transaction online, but virtually every engagement and every buying decision of theirs is being initiated online right now. And that's propelling the internet user growth. E-commerce is a natural byproduct of that. So today the industry is expected to be about 25 to 30 billion, but is expected to go fivefold to about 150 billion in the next 5 years or so. So massive, massive opportunity, and virtually all of it is going to travel and products.
So if you were a Singapore stakeholder sitting in the room, right, how would you connect with that space? What are some of the things that STB stakeholders in the room, how would we connect in that space, and what do you think we should be doing and looking at?
So the first thing which you also mentioned and was discussed is you have to find a way of reaching to the online Indian consumer. That needn't be for eventual purchase or transaction, but it definitely adds as a very strong positioning platform for the Indian consumer, because virtually all of their decisions are being taken online. And whether that means working with travel agents, or means working with the TripAdvisors or the Booking.coms of the world, or even very niche travel advisory businesses that are coming in, like you guys worked with the Tripotos and the LBBs of the world. Those are becoming extremely strong influencer platforms in this country and are driving decisions, if not the eventual purchase.
And I think, Ankur, what is also critical is that the Indian consumer wants touch and look and feel. Wants touch points. So where the internet story is a great story, what is also critical for us to understand is there is a very huge call center base behind each and every e-commerce expansion. And believe it or not, every transaction has a call associated with it, because as Indians, we have this tendency of we trust you, but we just want to reassure that yes, this transaction is completed, right? So that's the fundamental issue with us as Indians, and you will see that every other transaction is completed with a call to say, oh, are my bookings done? Is this safe? Do I have a confirmation? Is it booked for 3 nights? Is my seat confirmed? Etc., etc. So don't expect e-commerce to take over and run this for you. No. If you don't have a backup system, which is the call center, if you don't have the touch point, you're more often than not likely to fail. Because in the consumer's mind in India, the transaction is not completed till they talk to a human being. And that is true. That is true even for a 25-year-old guy today. I don't know if you agree.
No, it goes back to the point, and maybe it's an important thing if you haven't figured it out. Culturally, India is a trust-deficient country. We don't trust people easily. And that's largely because there were 1 billion of us, limited opportunities, so the only way that we could get ahead in life was not because we were smart, but because someone else was a failure. Don't take it personally when we're cross-questioning you.
And if you come to India, the Bombayites don't trust the Delhiites don't trust the Bombay. It's even worse. It gets more complicated. Sorry, Ankur.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's a very important consideration when you're doing business with India or within India, that don't take it personally that there will be cross-questioning, there will be this clarification, there will be this trust layer that they has to establish. And once that's established, it's phenomenal. Then you suddenly don't need to be the best, and they'll still continue trusting you because they've had a great experience with you and they somehow see that through.
And then thank you guys. I think The trust deficiency is one way of looking at it. The other way, my observation, having been in the market for a few years now, the other important point about the Indian culture is it is a serviced culture, meaning they need to be serviced. Yeah. They are in a home, they need their butlers, they need their car drivers, they need, and therefore, when it comes to travel, and especially travel today still remains as a very important purchase decision, right? They want to be serviced, they want to be sure. They have got somebody jolly well to whack if something goes wrong, right? So, intermediaries like the DMCs in the room, all of us have a business, right? And what it is important then is to make sure that when we are giving the services and the experiences, they are also now becoming very discerning. So it is trust deficient, it is serviced, but now they are expecting premium experiences for a value for money cost. So we need to figure out how we can balance all of this, all right? I got a few questions coming in. Maybe I'll ask Praveen for this. What is Singapore lacking as compared to countries like UAE, US, Australia, and Thailand, which has seen more than 20% of growth, which is what you've just mentioned? So what do you feel are some aspects that we are looking at and say Singapore is lacking and we need to pay attention to those? And since you have come back after 12 years, maybe it's an unfair question, but I think from a perspective of what you're observing.
No, again, not at the cost of being a spokesperson of Airbnb, but so the way I see it, Singapore comes across as very clinical from where India sees it, and it's good to be clinical, but as a consumer, and I was giving this example to Sridhar and Ankur yesterday, Indian consumer, or to that matter, any consumer is price sensitive, but the Indian consumer takes it to the other extreme altogether, right? Like Ankur said, you used to run into multiple shops and shop earlier. The grid or the matrix shows that we don't have time, but the behavior hasn't changed. I never jumped into multiple shops. I have the online platform now. So what I do, and I have friends who do this today, they actually work online, see which is the cheapest, and they go to the retail shop and tell the retail guy that this is the cheapest, because the guy wants it now. He wants the delivery today, and he wants it at the rate which is available online. So he goes to the retailer and says this is the cheapest, and he gets it. He gets the order. So that's how he has saved time in the process. But to come to the core question, I think the key is that the way I see it, families love coming over to Singapore, all right? Having said that, there are two types of families who create this whole travel experience or travel budgets out of India. The one that likes to spend per person per night about $600 odd. The other guy who likes to spend about $1,200 odd. I'm not talking about per night, I'm talking about a 4 nights, 5 days package. I'm an Indian, you see. So I'll tell you where Singapore doesn't, I wouldn't say it doesn't fit the bill, but is off my radar as an Indian, because at 600, Singapore doesn't fit in. It's more expensive than the 600. So where do I go? Thailand. I go to Bangkok. I go to Koh Samui. I love the journey experience there. Dubai falls under that category too, because as Indians, we like the flash. We like the way it's marketed, so we love going to Dubai as well. And the moment it comes to 1,200, 1,300, we prefer markets like Europe, which is available at 1,200, 1,300 for 5 nights, 6 days. Where does Singapore fall in, or even Hong Kong to that matter? It falls under the 800, 900 bracket. So at 600, I would rather go to Thailand. Or should I spend 900? Oh, let's go to 1,200 and let's fly Europe, because that's more aspiration. Because mind you, Ankur was highlighting this yesterday, and I completely agree with him. The first choice for Indians in terms of traveling for the first trip outside India is either Dubai or Singapore. All right? Over the last 5 to 7 years, you have a Thailand that's come in, which is Bangkok. And there is another destination which is going to grow at 100% this year. That's Dempasa, Bali. Bali is going at such a fast pace. And you find every other guy wanting to go to this part of the world. Malaysia is growing as well. So if we don't position ourselves, I'm a revenue management guy, I never like to drop prices. But if Singapore doesn't hit the sweet spot, it's not going to touch our hearts. That's the way I see it.
Thank you, Praveen. So to leverage and add on to that, I think all of us in the room have to consider a few things. Number one, the Indian traveler today is courted by many destinations. 10 years ago, by rough count, we had about 20-odd national tourism organizations or its appointed reps in India courting the Indian traveler. Today, 2018, as I look back and see Japan has opened up, Philippines is having a rep, there are close to about 45, 50 different national tourism organizations or representatives going after that consumer. So point number one. Point number two, the attraction that Singapore has for the Indian traveler continues to be very strong. But we are also fast being questioned, right? Is this the right price to pay for a Singapore experience? So all of us have to consider, is it good value for money or experiences that you're offering? And how are we competing with the other countries that are offering similar experiences or different experiences? So we need to be very mindful. We can't take it for granted that the Indian traveler will continue seeing Singapore as a top destination with the first passport, but we need to play for that space also, right? Let me ask a question on to Ankur. One question here. We can see that the Chinese market wants more of the Chinese culture when they travel. How do you see the Indians in this context? Do they also want some or more of the Indian culture when they travel?
That's, I'd say it's a mix of both. There is clearly a strong travel community in India which will travel as per their community. And they will have their own food. Vegetarianism is an extremely important criteria for them and so on. And then there is this urban traveler that truly wants to position itself as a global traveler. So they would love the right cuisines, they would love the right experiences to stay or the experiences to share. And I think that's the difference between, if I would argue without knowing any data, I would say that most families will fall under the cultural travelers. So they would want the familiarity and just the comfort of having their own tribe and group. But the young millennials would want to just absolutely mix and would absolutely want to share their trips with people from different nationalities or get to experience different foods and so on. And that's why, to Praveen's point, it's very easy for them to choose now destinations that offer that multicultural and that cross-cultural experience at pricing that they wouldn't necessarily get, which is it wasn't the case before when Bangkok was as multicultural as it is today. There wasn't the case where Bali was frequented by as many foreign tourists as that. Right? It used to be almost all Australia, and now it's becoming so much so that the young millennial Indian traveler is considering these options as addition to Singapore.
And if I could just add on, so the Indian traveler is still very much dictated by the cuisine, right? Like the Chinese travelers. So if you look at the cuisine, and my area director sitting in Mumbai, Adrian Kong, will keep on telling me the day that I see a Yakun Kaya toast filled with Indians is the day I believe that they have started experimenting with food. And I'm telling you, for heaven's sake, like, they have started experimenting with food. But I must admit, right? They are starting to experiment with food, and Singapore is a great place for experimentation because they can go easy. They can walk into a hawker center. They can try a $3 or $3.50 chicken rice. They like it, not like it. Price they have lost is $3.50, right? Versus some other experience. So they are starting to experiment. The second point is, but they still have a largely vegetarian population and base. And for that reason, right, last year, and we wanted to get them out of just Little India and Dosa and Naans, right? So last year we came out with, and you saw in the slides earlier, the Veg Food Guide. That was our way of communicating that the Indians of today can have many more vegetarian choices in Singapore. So yesterday was the first time, Ankur is a vegetarian, by the way. For the first time he was brought to Whole Earth, and I think it was a whole new experience for, so he was, wow, this is fascinating Peranakan food. So I think each and every one of us, especially the DMCs, you guys have an opportunity to weave in different types of experiences to make sure that they have a mix of both the Singaporean, because they want the authentic Singaporean experiences, but after the third or fourth day, like all of us are, We need our comfort food. We need something that is familiar to us, right? Okay, final question, and then we will get ourselves out of here. Maybe I'll just pose this to both for Ankur and Praveen to give your views. In terms of looking at the trajectory that we have, right, over the next 5 years or 10 years, to stay in the space of a mobile first, working millennial type consumer, at the same time not losing out that we are a family destination, right? What are one or two things that we should do as a Singapore Tourism Compact to go after the Indian traveler? How do we connect to the mobile-friendly fellas, the travelers? How do we make sure also that the families are also catered to? Maybe with Ankur first.
I don't want to just throw ideas at you without thinking through them. I'd argue that for the young millennial, one is to target them as the eventual consumer of the product, but I think it would be wiser to also target them as the buyer of the product and not necessarily the consumer, which means that I would, for instance, love to, because there is a very strong family culture in the country, and you know, we still stay with our parents even after you're married and so on. I'd love to send my parents and my siblings out to Singapore, even though I have never been there or might not. And that will determine my choice of how they begin to influence me. So they will become the advertising agents of STB rather than STB becoming one. It's conclusive that if I were to consider sending my parents for the first time out of the country, or for that nice, happy, no hang-ups and no stress vacation, Singapore would be absolutely on top. And that means that I might not be the one accompanying them, but there is this really nice laid out path for them where they get to experience 4 days, 5 days, and so on. And I have seen so many instances where they would come back and saying, hey, we had such a lovely time, and so on. And then that starts to drive my own just reaction towards the country.
Thank you. Thank you, Ankur. And Praveen?
No, I think sometimes it's good to say no to certain type of traffic, and that's something which we keep saying, being a part of revenue management. I think that's my job more than anything else. But the reality is, when you're growing at 20%, without really dropping your average room nights, without really dropping your average fares, which is what I see on the Singapore routes, I think you've done a fantastic job as a destination. And there has to be an identity. You shouldn't be going through an identity crisis. And I think a lot of these destinations that's appearing in the top 10 for India is going through an identity crisis, because they want to be offering, they want to offer a little bit of everything. And I think how you dictate this over the next 10 years is going to dictate the balance 20 years. Because mind you, if the millennial walks away with a feeling about a destination, he's going to be a family guy in about 15 years' time, and you want him to walk away with the right impression. And I think that's where Singapore is positioned beautifully. My suggestion would be, don't mess with it. Don't go after the millennial traffic, because of several reasons. They're bargain hunters. They form opinions. They are onto the social media. They spread things about what they see immediately. There is a rising middle class that you see in India that's going to grow at a very fast pace. For me, Singapore is a family destination, will be a family destination, and should be a family destination. And one has to look at this in that context. It's a great getaway for 3 nights, 4 days, 4 nights, 5 days, and in my view, it should continue like that.
Thank you, Praveen. And I think, so to conclude from STB's perspective and how we look at things, so number one, as I started off the entire presentation earlier, Singapore as a family-friendly destination is our bread and butter. Let's not mess with it. Let's not lose it, right? And all of us in the room have to work together as a tourism compact, making sure that we are servicing and giving excellent experiences to the family traveler. Now, from an STB perspective, when we look at it from a government organization perspective, and we have to look at it from how are we contributing to the ecosystem and what is the growth trajectory. The reason why we picked the topic of working millennials and the facts and figures that you have seen is to give you a sense of this is a space that we need to get connected to, right? Even if they are value and bargain hunters, it is a space that we need to get connected, we need to entice them, we need to excite them. And in this space, we will have, as a tourism organization, the task of making sure that the communications are going out and reaching out to them. And you, in your specific, whether it's you're an attraction or DMC or a hotel, have to also start thinking about how are you able to connect with them. Because as Praveen said, eventually they are going to be families. Eventually they are going to bring, and as Ankur said, they are going to book holidays for their parents. They are going to book holidays for their uncles and aunties. So we, STB, will focus on, as I said in my slide, families with children under 12, working millennials, cruise. I do not want to mess up with that. Number one source market is India for cruise. I think we need to work on that space. And just now I bumped into a couple of colleagues from Genting Dream and all. Yes, we will continue making sure Singapore as a cruise hub is, stays relevant in India. And then in the MICE space, right? Meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions. We can't lose that positioning either. India today still considers Singapore as a great place for incentives, meetings, and so on and so forth. And we need to maintain that position. So let's stay connected. Let's grow the love Indians have for Singapore. And we look forward to your continued support. Let's do it together. Let's 2018 be a great year. Thank you very much.